Guns are cool. Not in reality, but in movies.
Dodge this.
And games. Such as Lightgun Games, my love for which is well documented. Last time I made a video on the subject, it was Lightgun Games on the CDI, but this time I'm going more mainstream. Last year, when I got a Japanese PS2 and a big CRT, I made sure to also get guns for both PS1 and 2, as well as many games. But first, let's have a look at the guns themselves. The Namco Gun Con is a very cool piece of plastic, if I do say so myself. It doesn't look like a space blaster like the NES Zapper, nor a revolver like the guns for the Sega CD, CDI or 3DO, but more like the gun in Snatcher or something semi-futuristic like that. But like the Zapper before it, it looks different in different regions, and it was blue and pink in the arcades, as was the style at the time. The sequel gun, the Gun Con 2, is a little smaller, but also looks cool. It too was black in Japan. It has more buttons besides just the A and B button, and it also has start, select, a D-pad and a button on the butt. Now for the games. Let's start with Namco's variety shooting Point Blank series. In Japan they're called Gun Something, Gun Bullet, Gun Barrel, and Gun Balina. They all share the same basic setup. You do 4 stages at a time, which are all quite short, and then finish off with a fireworks show. It's kind of the WarioWare of Lightgun Games, and it really does live up to the word variety, with many kinds of stages. Shoot the targets, shoot the bad guys, one-shot, rapid fire, protect the guy, brain teasers, and more. For me personally, I don't like the rapid fire ones so much, but the brain teaser levels are a lot of fun. There are also plenty of references to other Namco characters and games. All 3 games have more modes than just arcade. They have training mode, high score mode, party or tournament mode, and sometimes special modes. The first game has a quest mode where you walk around on a map and get into random battles. How you shoot to guide Dr. Dan and Dr. Don reminds me of Zelda Phantom Hourglass. Also, is it just me or are Dr. Dan and Dr. Don Canadian? The second game had a party mode, which is not as robust as the quest mode, basically just a different way to play the stages with a short story intro. This also has a guest appearance from the Cosmo game, a Japanese-only Namco game series. The third one doesn't have a special mode, but makes up for it by being in higher resolution. It looks quite a bit better than the first 2 anyway. There was also Point Blank DS, in Japan disguised as a brain training game. A compilation disc was also released on PS2 with all 3 games, plus
Time Crisis.
There! Shoot him!
Point Blank was an arcade series first too, but Time Crisis was an institution in the arcades. Hell, it's still there. The main innovation over other shooters like this was the cover system, where you'd step on a pedal to move in and out of cover. In cover you can't be hurt, but time is ticking, so you can't cower in cover too much either. When it came home to the PS1, you would use the buttons on the gun instead. You can choose if pressing the button goes into cover or if releasing it does. But if you plug a regular controller to the second port, you can use any button to go into cover, which since I discovered has become my main way to play it, using my foot. This also allows me to hold the gun in just one hand, which I prefer for the immersion factor. The story in Time Crisis is a fun Save the President's Daughter type affair, and the voice acting is also delightfully bad. Not quite as delightful as House of the Dead, but close.
This nation will soon be mine.
There was also some great blood-pumping and epic action music.
Action!
Time Crisis is mandatory if you have a light gun, if your arm can handle it. As late as 2001, there was a sequel in
Project Titan,
outsourced to another company, and not based on an arcade game. In fact, it came out the same year as Time Crisis 2 on PS2. In Project Titan, you again play as
Richard Miller,
going after Cantaris from the first game's special mode.
Help me! I'm down here!
This game is pretty much just more Time Crisis, but it does add a counter that displays your consecutive hits, and the ability to change cover position during boss battles, something that is necessary, not optional. It's a good game, but nothing too special.
There! Get him!
There he is! C3F!
Time Crisis 2.
Time Crisis 2 then. Wild Dog is back and again working for some other nutjob bent on world domination. Somewhat unfortunately, according to me anyway, Richard Miller is gone and replaced by two new guys, Keith and Robert. As you might have guessed, there are two guys here because there's now two-player functionality added. If you're playing solo, you have to try and not shoot the other guy though. There's also a dual gun mode, which is awesome as hell, but harder to play. Time Crisis 2 is a step up from the original in almost every way. It also benefits from the new gun con being even more accurate than its predecessor.
Well, it appears we have a guest. Looks like we've caught you just in time. A leak like this would have been problematic, to say the least.
A punch like that, and you think you're gonna conquer the world?
Silence! You have no idea how perfect our plan is. Now take her away.
Here they come. 5, maybe?
No, I'd say 7.
What do you think you're doing here? This is a restricted area.
Stop right there! Oh my god!
Time Crisis 3 stars two other guys again. The voice acting is better again, but overall it's just more of the same great gun shooting gameplay. This time the main new feature is being able to switch between weapons while in cover, but only the regular pistol's ammo is unlimited. In previous games you could always shoot enemies more than once, which was nice in general, but now you do it to get more ammo out of them, like hitting a piñata. I don't have the other games in the series, but the next one was Crisis Zone, which is kind of dull. I've never even tried Time Crisis 4 for the PS3, which came with an all-orange light gun in all regions, equipped with 2 analog sticks, and a great Japanese TV commercial.
Wanna play guys? Okay. I'll play with you. Go! You wanna play rough? Okay. Say hello to our little friend.
There were a couple more too, but I'm going to focus on the ones that I own. Like Namco's two other PS1 gun games, Rescue Shot Boo Bee Bo and Ghoul Panic. The former is a bit different, an escort quest where you shoot all the bats and stuff that mean to harm the bunny guy, including shooting him in the butt to make him jump, and shooting him in the back of the head, yes really, to make him duck and avoid obstacles. It's enjoyable enough, and also playable with a mouse. Ghoul Panic is kind of like Point Blank, but all the enemies are generic ghosts, it's all in 3D, and it's not as good. Namco also made Ninja Assault on the PS2, which takes place in medieval Japan, where the ninjas had guns with infinite ammo, and follow the House of the Dead school of gun games where you reload by shooting off screen. These kind of games tend to be difficult, but here there are many difficulty levels to pick, so that's not a huge problem.
We're here at last. Yes. How long I've waited for this moment.
Vampire Knight is actually a collaboration between Namco and Sega, which shows, with the story and voice acting being great.
Oh no! I left my doll Molly up at Snowy Mountain.
It's as close to House of the Dead as you'll get on the PS2.
Who are you?
We hunt the creatures of the dark. Vampire hunters. Let's go. Yeah.
It's more balanced than Ninja Assault, and the graphics are better. This one you have to play if you can. Sega themselves made Virtua Cop Rebirth.
Virtua Cop Rebirth!
Kind of remakes of Virtua Cop 1 and 2, which could have gone under the Sega Aegis brand, but for some reason it didn't. I'm not a huge fan of the Virtua Cop formula, but they're decent enough, and there's a lot of options here to play the way that you want to, including with infinite lives. I have a few gun games that neither Sega nor Namco made. First, The Gun Shooting. A simple adventure through Polygon Land, courtesy of the Simple 1500 series, and with some animation by Tatsunoko. It's decent. Then I have Endgame, a bargain bin title that seems inspired by the show Alias, at least judging by the cover. It's a decent Time Crisis ripoff, but what makes it worth getting is that it's the other one that allows two guns simultaneous play. In theory anyway, I can't actually get it to work, although I have in the past. Speaking of Time Crisis ripoffs, I also have Gunfighter 2: The Revenge of Jesse James, which is a sequel to a PS1 game, and both are Time Crisis in cowboy hats, so to speak, which is fine by me. I guess Rebellion did make some good games occasionally. Even though it's technically not a light gun game, I want to mention Touch the Dead, A DS game from 2007 which plays like your average on-rails light gun shooter. An on-rails light gun shooter with only 2 character models apparently. It's not very good, but still, here it is. Speaking of zombies, let's talk about Capcom's Gun Survivor series, and their attempts to combine light gun gameplay with classic survival horror. The first game, Resident Evil Survivor, got the survival horror part down, somewhat, but as for the light gun part, not really. Besides controlling the game with just a gun being bothersome, you're not really free to shoot wherever you want. Whenever you shoot anything, the view centers and doesn't leave you with any freedom. It's just not that fun. Survivor 2 Code Veronica is a little better in the gun department, but not by a lot. The D-pad helps, but turning left and right with the buttons being where they are doesn't help. Even without the gun, the game isn't as good as the first. There's no story except for the bare bones of Code Veronica. And in a former arcade game like this, the door animations don't heighten the atmosphere, they're just in the way. The only upsides are the great Code Veronica music and Nemesis. It's nice to see the old guy again. Gun Survivor 3 isn't Resident Evil, but Dino Crisis. Apparently the time travel storyline connects to the main series somehow, but that is Kingdom Hearts levels of complicated, so I won't be explaining it. Anyway, this one has better controls than Survivor 2, being able to fully move with a D-pad, and it's not a former arcade game, and just a lot better in general. The game doesn't feel like a survival horror game, more like any other action game. But on the other hand, it's pretty fun, shooting both enemies and the scenery with many different weapons, but why is there a time limit? Survivor 3 is a lot better as I said, but it's still not that great, and it's because of the controls again. It's lacking a certain something. So far in the Survivor series, we've had decent game, bad shooting, bad game, bad shooting, decent game, decent shooting, but Capcom finally got it right, however, with Biohazard Gun Survivor 4 Heroes Never Die, aka Resident Evil Dead Aim. Sure, you can play with just a gun again, but why would you when you could connect a controller and use it like you would with a Wii nunchuck? This is much better. You can even play with a mouse. It actually makes it a little bit easier to hit your targets, but hey, I have this. It's also a fully fledged Resident Evil game. Not the first to take place on a cruise ship, nor the last, but it's still a cool setting. It is, however, the first Resident Evil game to have a kind of strafing. The main characters are pretty lame. Bruce, despite trying to look like Leon, can't pull it off, and he looks funny walking downstairs. But the villain, Mr. Advent Children over here, is actually a pretty interesting nutjob. Obsessed with beauty, and he turns himself into a tyrant with built-in high heels. I'd also like to mention the covers to this and Gun Survivor 3 were designed by Shinkiro, an artist who's worked for SNK and Capcom, and certainly left his mark in a good way. There are quite a few PS1 gun games that I don't have actually. I only have the ones that support the GunCon, which unfortunately doesn't include Project Horned Owl and some others that only support the Konami Justifier. Police 24/7 on PS2 is an interesting case because it was made for Konami's Hyper Blaster gun and Capture Eye camera, so you can duck and take cover in real life, sort of like an early Kinect, even earlier than Sony's iToy. Other guns are compatible too, and you can use a PC webcam, but it does not support the GunCons or the iToy. GunCom 2 was released in Europe, but is really Death Crimson OX Plus, which is a sort of sequel to the legendary gun game originally released for the Saturn. But it's not that cheap, and I've heard it's not good either, so eh. Although I don't have my Famicom Hypershot or the CDI Peacekeeper anymore, I do have 2 of the best light guns ever made, and some of the very best games the genre has to offer here on PS1 and PS2. I would say the best ones are Point Blank 3, Time Crisis 3, and Vampire Knight.
This can't be.
The worst ones I have would be The Gun Shooting and Ghoul Panic. Don't be sad that you didn't get those, Americans. There may come a day where no CRTs function anymore and these games can't be played. But until that day, I shall continue to enjoy them. I suggest that if you have access to a CRT, you give them a shot.